But before I introduce her, my name is Ohita Odu Thomas. I am on the team of Fresh Start Hub, which is remains committed to helping newcomers, international students, and immigrants, to navigate the career space in Canada through several means. We have podcasts where you hear David's phenomenal voice. We have free resources. We have training. So I will repeat this again when everyone is here. Please do not forget to check out our website, www.thefreshstarthub.com. A few housekeeping rules. Please remain on mute, turn on your videos. That'll be nice. Feel free to stalk some people on LinkedIn. This is also, besides Rebecca, you also want to connect with other people because you never know. But before Rebecca speaks, please keep in mind, listen carefully, write down your questions, and then when it's time for the question session, then you unmute yourself, speak. Like David said, Rebecca is warm and kind. I just met her today and she's phenomenal already. So our guest today is a leader at one of the top banks, Royal Bank of Canada, proudly. She is the vice president of the commercial financial services at RBC. That's RBC. Focus on Asian markets, right? She does have several certifications. She's a strong believer of the growth mindset, continuous learnings. Some of her certifications include the CFA, which is, if you're an accountant here, you would know that CFA is a big deal. So without further ado, I would like to introduce each and every one of us to Rebecca. Rebecca Pang, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, David and Ohita, for having me tonight. And I will also echo tonight, beautiful weather. So thanks for being here, spending the next hour together. Always grateful for this kind of opportunity to get to connect with people in a different way. And I hope everyone here has been doing well for the, we just passed 1 year anniversary of lockdown and self-isolation. So taking good care of yourself is so important. And March is I think there's a lot of things happening. It's the International Women's Day, and I think there's Diversity, Anti-Discrimination Day, and then obviously what happened last week has been raised the awareness of Asian American and the kind of challenges that are very common for a lot of the newcomer and immigrants. So I find tonight getting here with all of you to talk about the challenges and what we can do is quite timely. Let me talk a little bit about my background, and happy to answer any question and it's just a frank dialogue and exchange with all of you, whatever you want to ask. So I grew up in Hong Kong, did my first degree in accounting and joined McKinsey & Company management consulting firm and spent a couple of years there and obviously consulting on a lot of Fortune 500 companies in the Greater China. And at that time, a lot of the state-owned enterprise in China are embarking a lot of transformational changes and getting ready to have their IPO. So I then move on.
Could you please put yourself on mute?
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I move on to one of my clients, also state enterprise, called China Netcom. It's the #2 telecom operator in China, and doing investor relations, looking for outbound acquisition as well as strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So after that, as many management consulting plan to do, I went back to school to get my MBA at Stanford. Was always planning to go back to China, because China obviously growing 8-9% back then, and a lot of great opportunities. But also I met my husband during my time at Stanford, who is also from Hong Kong originally, but Canadian. So I kind of decided to stay in North America. After I graduated, I spent a year in Seattle and working for T-Mobile USA because of my telecom background doing strategy, and then decided that, hey, I have to come to Canada, right, to settle down, because it's either Asia or Canada, and US is kind of in between. We don't have status there. So came here 13 years ago, pretty much started all over again, and like many other immigrants, sent out hundreds of letters and haven't heard back from most of them. And for those companies that reach out, and then the first thing they ask is, what's your Canadian experience? I say, no, but I have experience in the two largest economies of the world, China and US, but no, you don't have Canadian experience. And luckily, I think it's really full networking. One of my ex-coworker at McKinsey, she has an auntie who worked in an insurance company in Canada, who happened to be the client for the investment banking team at one of the FIs. So I got the interview and joined, the investment banking merger and acquisition team with CIBC, and then have since then been in the banking industry, moved from investment banking and then to corporate development, which is doing internal M&A for the bank, as well as doing some internal strategy, and then also get into data analytics to drive omni-channel experience. And now I'm in a sales role, so helping small, medium business owners to really, I think right now, survive and thrive and build their Canadian dream, right? Because most of my clients, they're also immigrant. So that's what I'm focusing on. Aside from work, I also get involved in a lot of nonprofit. I can talk about it, but I find that when I first came to Canada, feeling really difficult to integrate into the professional world completely, especially I was in investment banking. And getting involved in the nonprofit world is really my way of finding my identity and my voice in this new country. So now I sit on the board of Toronto Zoo, and also I was the advisor for the Ted Rogers Business School Leadership Center for Ryerson. Also sit on the board for Yi Hong Foundation. Yi Hong is one of the largest long-term care for the Asian communities. And that's really how I feel more Canadian and find my roots here and kind of bring meaning to what I do every day. Because I would say as an immigrant, we all try hard, but it's quite unavoidable that sometimes we compare with our friends and relatives back in our home. The economy there is growing faster, and they have a leg up from where we're here, starting from scratch. We work hard, and I find really getting involved in the voluntary work, as cliche as it sounds, sometimes you will treat your own kind of it gives you perspective on there are other people struggling with basic stuff, and am I thinking about first world problem? Most of the time I am, right? Am I worrying about first world issue, whether I get the promotion or not? And there are people actually I can move a dial to help and advance their well-being. So that part is fulfilling and really gives me perspective to see, what I can do in this country beyond having a good job. So I'll stop here and give it back to Heather. Any questions you and the audience are interested in asking?
Thank you so much, Rebecca. So the floor is open. Does anyone have any questions for Rebecca so far? Don't be shy. Does anyone have any questions for Rebecca so far?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question about you joining a nonprofit. How did that start? Did you go out and look for an opportunity, or did an opportunity come up to you to join a nonprofit? And just how you started in that end.
Yeah, very good question. I think generally you always take initiative proactive for us to go and look for opportunities. Right? Obviously, the first few involvement is not as a board of directors, so I'm always active, playing like a mentor role for organizations like TriMac or the CFA, Toronto chapter, as well as at that point like Rodman, University of Toronto Rodman School. There's a women organization, right? So I think you start with organization and the role that you feel you can add value quickly, right? Whatever background you came from, be a mentor. And also at that time, I helped a couple of my ex-colleagues to start an organization that do pro bono consulting project for other nonprofit organizations. So that involves like leading a team of young professionals to think about marketing strategy for another nonprofit. There are tons of opportunities, right? In fact, one of my current colleagues, he and his wife started an organization called 10,000 hours, not 10,000 coffee, 10,000 hours, which is basically a matching system on matching skill set with nonprofit organization. They really need that kind of skill set. These days, there are tons of nonprofit organizations. We need, sorry, I just finished my dinner very quickly. A lot of organizations need digital marketing expert, as you can imagine. They need to pivot. So you can look for that and then gradually and move on to looking for board position. The first one is always the hardest. There are organizations like the Board Match and another one used to be called Diversity on Board. If you Google it, it will point you to another organization, I think right now under Ryerson, but you can check it, that really try to match minority or women to nonprofit board position. So from one lead to the other, it's kind of like job. You build your broad resume similar to your job resume, but it's really fulfilling. And right now I'm spending more time on being a board of director because I find I learn so much. I love fundraising and mentor, but I feel I can apply more of my skill set as a board of director. And also very interesting, for example, Toronto Zoo, I can learn about the governance and also see the different roles they play in the society and the unique challenges they're facing from a strategy perspective.
Thank you.
Awesome. Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, may I ask?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you very much for sharing. And I do have actually a lot of questions, but I just gonna ask one, which is, I guess, like most of the audience here might be very interested in. So you shift your role pretty much from investment banking, capital market, more towards commercial bankings, right? Within the banks, within the banking industry. I just want to know what's the insights, regarding to different roles in terms of different functions and how you make that pivot happen. That's probably my question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I always a believer of what Steve Jobs said, connecting the dots. I know when he said it, he meant something different. I mean, basically what he said is you can only look back on how you connect the dots. It's very hard to look forward to connect the dots. So somehow you have to believe things are all line up and will synergize with each other in the future. But when I say connect the dots, I really think in today's world, banking or whatever industry, it's changing rapidly. So it becomes very important for us to be able to pivot and be able to master transferable skill set so that you can take it to another area or another function or another line of business. Top leaders right now, I think gradually you need to prove people three things, right? Broadly. One is you can think strategically for the firm, right? Long term. And then second, you can get things done, right? That could mean you can lead big operational project and meet the deadline and complete it. Or it could mean you manage a P&L and grow it, right? The third thing is you can lead people. So on that three broad category, I try to just really check the box and pivot and see what I want to learn next. And every role, I make sure I'm focusing on learning the transferable skill set. For example, I find, right now in commercial banking, I'm mostly evaluating deals from a lending perspective, right? Like I'm lending to my client that have real estate to support as a collateral using banking speak. In the past, when I was in corporate development, I was evaluating, let's say, private equity investment or equity investment for the bank. So there are some fundamental, very, very transferable when you're evaluating from an equity deal to a debt deal. And also, I was leading a data team a couple years ago, and now I'm leading a sales team. So there's some obvious difference, right? They're completely different personalities. You can imagine like sales extrovert and prima donna, and now, you know, data analytics, like data nerd and geek. But there are also a lot of commonalities of what's important being a good leader, right? And how you support a team, and no matter they are a high performer, core performer, or someone who is struggling, and how you think of people in terms of the skill and will matrix, and how you move each of them to the quadrant that you want them to be, right? So I think it's a long way to answer your question. I mean, first of all, I think it's important for a future leader to think about the breadth and the depth. I know my depth is always in financial analysis and strategy because I spend a lot of time in that. And I want my breadth to be, you know, continue to augment my leadership style and leadership capability, and the ability to think strategically and get things done. That's number one, the importance of having the diversity of skill set and exposure, and painting your path, right? Like, you know, you can't completely change industry and function. Then people wonder, okay, you're all over the map. It's not connecting the dots anymore, but all over the map, right? And then the second thing is how to do that. And I'll say just broadly, just, you know, always keep in mind in every position, what are the transferable skills that you want to focus, right? It's obviously not about, oh, I'm so familiar with these 10 systems I use. But once you change the bank, even the same role you're in, it will be different systems. So those are not transferable skills. Those are not higher order skills. But higher order skills will be your curiosity, you know, how you communicate, how you lead people. And sometimes lead people doesn't mean you have to be a leader, right? For example, I deal with clients, or my account manager deal with clients. You are the leader of the client relationship, right? You lead the client to where they want to be, and to trust your advice, right? And then we always have to deal with our risk management department. It's also, how do you lead the conversation so you can you can get people to buy in and get to where you want to be. So those would be the higher order skills, and critical thinking, being curious, and keen and continue to learn.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Does that answer your question, Hao?
Yes, I've been like writing notes crazily while hearing.
Awesome. So Rebecca, some people had sent in questions prior to the session. I will ask one of them. As an international student that just moved to Canada a year ago and recently finished my MBA, what would you recommend me to fight the non-Canadian experience barrier that most companies set for migrants?
Yeah, as I talk about, it's a real challenge, right? No matter, you know, whether I dodge it, right? Like, if I'm being honest with you, it is a challenge. But I think generally the society is getting better. But you're right to use the word fight, because you have to fight it. So there's several ways to fight it. First of all, you have to make it easy for the other person to look at you, to look at your resume, right? For example, I mentioned in my introduction, I work for a company called China Netcom. Raise of hands, anyone have heard about China Netcom? Nobody. Oh, how? Okay, as I expect, right? So maybe two, three of them, two, three of you. Well, China Netcom is now the second largest telecom fixed line operator in China, or even like China Mobile. I don't know many people have heard about it, but China Mobile have what, couple 100 million mobile users, and what's the population of Canada? 32 million, right? So you have to paint it. Okay, you know, China Netcom, number 2 fixed line operator with 500 million subscribers, or X billion revenue, right? So you have to translate your work experience, or your university is the highest ranking university in whatever field in your country, right? So make it easy for the HR and hiring manager. And some of them may not have study or work outside Canada, right? So you keep that in mind. You know, you're translating what you're familiar to them, right? And then the second thing is, so try to really emphasize your transferable skill set, right? So you are MBA student, so I assume you have some work experience from your country, right? So you probably, the first job in Canada have to focus on the industry or the function you already have experience, right? If you're looking at change of country, change of industry, change of function, it's not going to work, right? So you have to be realistic, leverage something you already have, right? And then the third thing is, really be crisp and highlight your value add as an internationally trained professional. As a global citizen, you know what's going on for the rest of the world. Now, it's probably easier for certain industry than other, right? For example, if you go into traditional industry, like let's say forestry or mining, it will be a bit of a harder sell if I'm from China. Now going to mining industry here, because maybe there's not much I can leverage from my experience in China. But if you're trying to go into technology industry or artificial intelligence, maybe your prior experience from your country is more ahead of Canada. Or if you want to go into retail industry, I mean, retail is in pretty bad shape now. But just for argument's sake, if you want to go into retail, then perhaps in your prior experience in your home country, you are quite ahead in thinking about client segment strategy, which we don't have it here in Canada. So try to highlight, once you cover the basic, so hey, I know the basic about Canada, I translate my experience to something you as an HR or hiring manager can relate to. Now I'm augmenting my case by adding my value add to you so that you may find it helpful. So to be able to translate that value add, you have to know what people in Canada are looking for, right? What's the latest trend in retail that we are not there yet, but we are looking ahead? For example, in China, they're talking about O2O, online to offline. People are scratching their head. Here in Canada, also like China is talking a lot about leveraging various e-commerce platform, using drone for delivery. We don't quite have it here yet, right? So if you happen to know those trends or happen to work on those trends in the past, so those will be a good sell for you to highlight and talk about. And same old networking is important, right? Networking rigorously, don't be shy. You will hear a lot of no. You just need to hear a few yes to get you ahead. But talking to the Canadian or immigrant who have been working in Canada for enough time, you will start to understand the nuances in the Canadian working environment for the industry you're interested in. And I think that you can prepare yourself better when you get a chance to interview, because I think about the hiring manager, what they have in their mind, right? Of course, they want to pick the best candidates. First of all, when they read your resume, they don't know how good you are if you don't translate it for them. Second, they also worry about, okay, can this person culturally fit into our environment? Do they know about Canadian working environment? Do they know about Canadian banking industry, the basic 101? You have to show that. Thirdly, is it the best candidate? Am I getting something cover my basis plus something extra, the bonus? What's the bonus I'm getting from this international candidate? So you have to be able to sell on those elements.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. For those of you just joining us, once again, we're speaking to Rebecca Pang of Royal Bank of Canada with expertise in finance, right? And currently now in sales as well. She immigrated to Canada 14 years ago, right, Rebecca? 14. Awesome. So please feel free. The stage is open. Please ask your questions. Just unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Yeah, I have a quick question for Rebecca.
Go ahead.
So my name is Karthik, and I'm a second-year Bachelor of Business Administration student at Goodman School of Business at Brock University. I know you talked in a detail about transferable skills, but what do you think about soft skills? How important are soft skills? And one more question for you is, I'm interested in finance. I'm going to specialize next year in finance, and I'm really interested in capital markets, the equity side. So what would you suggest for me, like for the upcoming years, how to elevate myself and like make myself stand out from the other candidates for the similar positions?
Yeah, so thanks for your question, Katik. So I remember your second question. Your first question is how, sorry, do you
Soft
remind me
skills.
your first question?
What's
Oh, soft skill, yeah, of course.
Soft
Soft skill is very important, very important. I think, you know, what I just answered the previous question is, how do you get the opportunity, a high opportunity to get interview? After interview, it's all about soft skill, how you present yourself, and then once you get a job, well, sometimes you have to go through rounds of interview, right, for the whole team to meet you. So your soft skill will show, and they will probably ask question, behavioral question on, how do you deal with a conflict situation, or give me an example that you have to convince someone else who disagree with you, et cetera, right? Once you get into the job, I think it's really soft skill, right? It is how people feel working with you. And in management consulting and investment banking, we always joke about this 3 a.m. task, because, you know, long hours, 100 hours, right? For the associate, usually it's a post-MBA job. Like, you think about at 3 a.m., do you want to work with this analyst, right? So that will be a determining factor how you will survive as an analyst in those high stress situations, because it's very common. It's not makeup, it's totally common. Or in the pre-COVID day, we always joke about if you have to get on a flight to a client meeting. I think we don't these days, but back to normal. We get on a flight. Do you want to sit with this next person when you're on a 10-hour flight flying from Hong Kong to, I don't know, like Germany or the US, right? Do you want to sit with this person for 10 hours? And I'll add one more to that is sometimes, you know, the benefit of being a post-MBA associate is you got to go home, say at 1 a.m. and then delegate to your analyst. You're going to do this, finish the model, and I will come back at 8 a.m. tomorrow to review your work. So I'll ask myself, can I trust this analyst so that I can go home and sleep peacefully and come back at 8 a.m. and check the work, and hopefully nothing gone really wrong, so we'll be ready for the big meeting at 10 a.m., right? So these are the tests about, you know, from reliability and pay attention to details, very important for the first few years. Not to say it's not important in later of your career, but something else become more important, and the attention to details become bread and butter, right? From days, you know, you gotta have that. And then also like how you make the other person want to work with you, right? Because a lot of these jobs like capital market, in a way, is still kind of like an apprenticeship, right? Because you can learn only so much about how to build a model. That kind of address your second question later on. And you can learn about how to read financial statements, but in capital market, it's really about how do you talk to clients? How do you make a pitch? And all of this you have to learn from the MD or learn from the director or the associate. And whether they're willing to teach you is really rely on how much they like you or not, right? So super important. And of course, like dealing with client also very important. And those are high stress situations because capital market, when I was there, most of the time, the deals only get announced on a Friday afternoon and everything need to get done on Monday, right? So client also working very hard, and you have to make sure client are happy and enjoy working with you, right? So to answer your second question, any advice, I think first of all, you know, you got to make sure you have the knowledge, right? Take all the relevant courses. Some people start looking at CFA, at least level 1, when they're at school, right? You can consider that. And then make sure you attend all the information session, right? There's no harm start attending it when you are year 2. You definitely need to attend it when you are year 3 and year 4. And we all know, like, getting a summer job will give you a much higher chance to get a full-time job. In terms of preparing for interview, right, there's tons of books and websites. You probably know a few. I think those are useful, right? You're going to cover the basics, right? There are some questions within your control, right? Like they would talk about how do you do a DCF, right? How do you do a valuation, and all of those. You should remember it back and forth, and be able to internalize and speak logically and fluently, not in a robotic way, but really internalize and make sure your answers full. But there will also be some behavioral question, as I mentioned, right? How do you, give me an example of how you lead a team, give me an example that you have to work with a team member that is very challenging, right? Things like that. You have to be prepared to be able to address that.
That's true. Awesome. So
Thank you so much for your answer.
Great, great, great. Do we have any other questions?
May I have a question, please?
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's going to be a little bit harder because I'm director in the TD. I'm working in the business banking. Sorry, can you hear me well?
Yeah, now it's better.
Yeah, so I'm the director in the business banking in TD. I have 11 years working in the finance. My question is like changing the job and going from one financial institute to another financial institute. It's going to be really hard. So I know like you may not have that experience, or you don't know how it's going to be, but I'm wondering if you have any knowledge around that, or if you have any like the kind of the mentorship I can get from you. What should I do, like to go to the different financial, to go to the, like, let's say to go to the RBC, to the best bank, and have my experience and do some of those things. Having said that, I have an MBA, but it doesn't mean like having an MBA or like having 10 years experience with one financial or any other thing that's gonna give me a job or give me a better job or something like that. So I'm wondering what would be your suggestion on that?
Yeah, so it's a great question, right? Obviously, everyone has different circumstances. So I think if your question is about whether and how to change FI, right? I will first answer by there's pros and cons of changing FI. Sometimes some people say, oh, you're going to move around to get promoted. It may be true in some circumstances, but I made the change from one FI to RBC 5 years ago. I will say there are lots of relationships that I gave up, and the credibility you have to build again when you move organizations. So for me right now, I would definitely think twice. I did think twice back then that there's, sometimes an opportunity open up, or the kind of work that you want to try make you to make the move. But I will encourage people to think twice or third time, right? Especially when you get to the mid-career. It does take quite some time to rebuild those networks. I spent my first 10 years in Canada with CIBC, I think almost 10 years. Yeah, roughly, or 9 years. So it's a long time, right? So consider that. In terms of how, I think there's no difference from, changing to any job or industry, right? It's really, networking is always the best way, right? Now it's a little bit more difficult, but I think reaching out to people through LinkedIn, and maybe before we go there, I think really ask yourself hard, right? Why do you want to make the change? Is it for that position, or a one-up promotion, or the kind of people you interview with another bank you really like, right? Or is it because of the new bank is bigger or better platform? The reality is people do jump from one bank to another. There are differences in size among the big 5 banks, but they are also quite similar, more similar than differences, right? I can understand if one is at a credit union, so that there will be benefit to go from credit union to a national bank with wider coverage, right? So I will definitely think twice on what you want in the long term. And as I always say, at the end of the day, it's really who you work with, right, matters the most, because you spend lots of time working with the people and your manager, and whether you enjoy working with him or her, I think that matters a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Anyone have any more questions?
Hi, Rebecca. This is Abhishek. I am also a member of the Fresh Start Hub, and I work closely with David and Ohita. But my question is a little different. It's not related to capital market, but it's related to a pivot that I recently made, and I find myself, at crossroads, not being happy with the pivot that I made. I was working as a senior consultant at Deloitte in the change management space. That's the space that I thought that I was passionate about, as I wanted to be on the people side, working closely with people, redefining their employee experience, working on leadership development, how people are engaged and motivated in the organization, right? So that was the idea of getting behind into the change management space, and that is something that I worked towards whole of last year, to make that possible, because I did my, sorry, I'm going a little fast there, but I did my MBA in 2019. I have a engineering background of 5.5 years. I wanted to make that pivot from engineering project management into consulting. I worked towards it, and now Deloitte, I started in January, and last week I quit the organization because I didn't like the consulting culture. I didn't like the work that I was doing. So the question that I have is that I thought that that's the space that I wanted to be in. I worked towards it. I pursued certifications. I had numerous conversations, only to realize that that's something that isn't something that I want. I do realize that I want to work closely with people, and in the areas that I spoke about. But what are the steps that I should incorporate? What are the strategies that I should implement, so as to not find myself in a similar situation 5 years down the line? How do I make things right now?
Well, first of all, I think the area you touch on indeed is an important area for a lot of senior leader, right? So you should take comfort of that. Now you have done some work in the area, right? Like the CHRO position receive much more attention than in the past, and now the big bank, I'm sure other industry, major companies in other industry talk about culture, the diversity and inclusion. These are all very important topic in employee engagement, right? So I wouldn't completely toss it away. First of all, the second thing is you may now have a bit of time to step back and unpack, right? You have to ask yourself, and then I have some similar experience, which I will share later. You have to unpack it and ask yourself, is it the topic that you don't like, or is it the people that you work with, or is it the environment, or the firm, or the kind of position you are in? Because you could be an HR professional, let's say within a big bank or other organization. You could be the one that's driving the change directly in the organization, right? So you have to ask yourself which part you don't like. And I will share similar experiences. I was in data analytics. I absolutely had no data background. My team, they are data analysts. They can use SAS and all of those programming language. You can see I stutter a little bit because it's not my DNA. I learn a little bit on how to manage a data team, but I'm faking it, right? And there's, 2 years in, I get in with a lot of excitement. Oh, AI, machine learning, I'm doing it. Now I'm a data scientist. Obviously, I'm not. And 2 years in, I find there's certain element missing that make data analyst work or data analytics work really difficult. And then I have to pivot, and that's when I move institution as well. But you know what? I still love data. I just realized I may not be able to be the leader that lead a data team because I'm not a data scientist by training, and without that, it will not be able to take the team to very far and do kind of the amazing work that I wish I'm doing, not the reporting kind of work that I was doing. And I also become more mindful about for a data analytics team to be successful, not only you need talent, but the environment, the data integrity, and the freedom you need are so crucial. And I guess just generally the data readiness for an organization need to be there. Without that, you can't, your hands are tied. So keep that in mind and rethink your experience, what is missing. And I think hopefully from that visit you can find the answer, right? And I would say many leaders' role require the employee engagement and company culture building, right? So you may not just focusing on HR role within an organization, but it could be some form of leader, right? You just have to repackage your skill set and be able to sell that value proposition.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, just to add to what you said, I think, the role that I was in was more transactional, working closely with system integrations. If a new system is going to be implemented in the organization, how that is going to look like for the end user. So what I ended up doing most of the time is just, translating those functional specs in a more digestible language for the end user, but nothing around experience, nothing around, whether they want it in the first place, nothing around culture, nothing around human behavior, which is what, is of real interest to me. How do people make decision making based on, the chemical reactions that are going on in their, brain, based on their cultural values, based on, the norms that they have. And, that really shapes up everything that an employee, that an individual is. So that's the space that I'm looking at. But I'm just, like I mentioned, I, thought that, that was the space that was going to give me that. And, all of a sudden, this year I find that it isn't. And, I just find myself that, how do I go from here on now? Should I go back to the root? Should I start, at square one? Or, is there elements that I can leverage and then, take it forward in my journey?
Yeah, I will add that. I mean, it sounds like, first of all, there's nothing wrong to try something and find out, oh, that's not what I was looking for. It's absolutely okay. And having that awareness and kind of cut the loss, I think is also a good decision. And the second thing, it sounds like you have certain ingredients, it's kind of look at the big puzzle. You have some pieces, and now you're missing some pieces that you can potentially bridge by doing some online learning. And happy to talk about. I'm always a big fan of Coursera and LinkedIn Learning and bridge those elements. And then with all of these, I think you can extrapolate and of course fake it until you make it, right? And you can bridge to where you want to be and get the kind of job, right?
Right. Thank you so much. I mean, to your point earlier that you mentioned, connecting the dots and not having that Canadian experience in my resume, when I look at myself, it's engineering, project management. So yes, I'm someone who's interested in that space, but how do I bring that element that isn't there? But, to your point, you mentioned that, those are things that can be absorbed through, reading material, through, online trainings and certifications. So, thank you so much. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Abhishek. I do have one question here, and it's generally around how you have been able to stand out in the crowd, like in your peers at work. So it says, can you share what you think you did differently from your peers that enable you to get this far in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. Early in my career, I always, I think I work hard and sometimes work more hard than some of my peers. That's definitely crucial to bridge the gap that I'm an immigrant and I may not know that many people, right? And I think that's fundamental. You do need to take the extra mile and not just focusing on your job mandate, but try to think about more, right? And again, like back into the investment banking or management consulting day, we always think about, in a way, my job is to make my boss look good, right? I think as a middle manager, it still are, right? And my team, direct report, they also know, some of them also know, and they want to make me look good, right? It's not just signing your boss, but really, how do you help your boss so that when he or she has to present certain things in front of her one-on, she's covered and she can do well, right? So think along that dimension. And another thing sometimes people talk about is, in order to get promoted, then you think about how can you replace your boss in a nice way, right? Like people can only see you one up when they can visualize you in that position. So sometimes being too good in your job, I think is important, but also you want to make sure you don't limit yourself so that they only see you in your current position, right? And then gradually when you're a middle manager, thinking about talent management is important. You have to be able to show, hey, I have a successor, many choices, don't worry, promote me. Someone else can do my job, right? So in a way, early in the career, you want to make sure you are so crucial in what you do. People need you. And then later in your career, when you're a leader, you also have to make sure you are replaceable in a way, in a good way, right? So that people can visualize, oh, you're ready to go for the next job. And then networking, as I talk about, is so important. Sometimes, if anything, I wish myself to do more. It's always networking. It's not to do more financial modeling and PowerPoint lever. It's really spending more time in networking, right? And as I talk about ability to learning how to learn, right? Knowing what to learn in your job is important, right? In my current role, there's a lot of things I have to pay attention, managing a team, right? Hitting the result, looking at the portfolio, making sure the quality of the portfolio is good, talent management, coaching the people, working with a lot of RBC partners, as well as building the business development effort. So I have to be clear on a daily basis, on a weekly and monthly basis, where I want to spend my energy, where can I get the biggest bang for the buck? Where's the most efficient use of my time to maximize the value I can create. As I mentioned, there are things that I can learn in more detail, like all the policy or the system, how to use, but I have to be sharp about there are things that I only need to know up to 50% is good enough, because the rest I can leave it with my team, knowing that they will do fine, right? And there are certain things I have to stand out and be 200% of it, right? That really build my brand. So you have to know where you want to spend your energy. And other things like be a problem solver, not a complainer, right? Sometimes I can see there are difference between people. When I call certain people, the first thing they say, oh, business is bad because of COVID. Oh, unfortunately, because of COVID, then blah, blah, blah. But there are also other people on the other spectrum is, wow, I'm doing A, B, C, D, E to try to get more volume to the door, right? So I think try to eliminate unlucky and unfortunate in your vocabulary or dialogue when you talk to your manager, right? That's nothing unfortunate, right? Everything has a reason. And it's always good to come out as a solution provider than a complainer. You can absolutely, and we should absolutely raise issues with your one-up, but at the same time, after you raise issues, you have to talk about, hey, this is what I think, the two options, and I need your support, whatever support in each of the options, etc. Yeah, positive attitude, that goes a long way, right? Like, everyone wants to work with a person who smile and pleasant to work with. I can go back to my 3 a.m. task, right? I think all of these are important, and sometimes, yeah, you do have to tell yourself, right? Especially when life is tough. Really, when you're working at 2 a.m., it's very hard to keep smiling, but you have to when you're in that environment to be the person that people come to you because of the knowledge, because of your capability, and because of your personality.
Awesome. Rebecca, there's something you keep speaking about, networking, which since this is an immigrant crowd, even speaking for myself, coming to Canada in 2018, networking was hard. Like, I remember work and we were in person. So imagine walking into a room and people are already like in groups. I just look around, I'm like, how do I break the ice? Like, how do I walk up to people? But I guess now that things are virtual, it's easy to send a LinkedIn message or whatever. But do you have like some tips or like some guidance to tell people on how to, network? Now it's easier.
Yeah, no, great question. It's something that I continue to have to improve myself because naturally I'm a deep introvert. Although sometimes people don't believe it because I fake it for so many years. But when I first came here, every time when I went out for networking, it's pretty dreadful, and sometimes I dread my feet. But at the beginning, I try to go out with a good friend who is like my rain man, right? A very extrovert. So for her, I get to know and shake hands with people I feel more comfortable. So that's a good strategy, and as much as you can make yourself comfortable, it will make the networking experience more pleasant for you, especially if you're introvert like myself. Second of all, I think really think about is building relationship, right? Well, if someone comes to you and say, hey, Rebecca, I want a job, how would you feel, right? You always think about it as a long-term building relationship, and you think about win-win, even though, you may think, oh, I'm an immigrant, I don't have a job, or I have a junior job, how can I add value to someone else who's more senior? But don't limit yourself, right? And pay attention and read the LinkedIn and then read the article that person has liked or post, right? You know what they're interested in. For example, I give you one case that a young professional that I come across and I sort of play a mentor role and keep in touch for many, many years. And at that point, I was interested in doing more nonprofit and doing more speaker events, right? So he was involved in a young professional organization. He said, "Hey, Rebecca, long time no talk," and say, "Oh, I'm running this." Organizing this whatever event, I would like to invite you as a speaker. So you always have in mind what value you can bring to that person based on what you understand what they want, right? And same idea, like I talked to a female, senior part of a law firm, right? Obviously, she was born and raised in Canada, very experienced. She has a lot of her network, and I'm interested in asking her about how to get on the board for a larger organization. But I also know that she has a son just graduate, and looking for job, and then she wasn't sure her son wanted to look for something more tech oriented. And I thought, oh, I'm happy to talk to your son, because in the bank right now we also have the LBC Ventures, which is closer to a fintech these days while you're working for a big organization. So those could be good options to think about. So you just keep thinking how you can help the other person by thinking broadly, or what you can help that person on their son or whatever cousin and this and that, and you know, the whatever hobby they want to do, right? Then I think that's the fundamental of building good relationship. And there are also tips that before the COVID, when I go to a networking event, I have to force myself, because sometimes I got really exhausted in a networking event. So I always force myself that I have to hang out 50 cards and take back 50 cards. So it's like a game for myself. I can't leave before I achieve that, even though 49 of the card may not be useful, but it's just having that mentality to force yourself to do something consistently.
Awesome, great. How do you have, I know you had said you have like a long list of questions, so but what do you have like a pressing question you want to ask, or?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I do want to, you know, make all my question valuable to, you know, almost everyone. So yeah, my new question is I write it down like cause we've been in COVID for almost a year now, and what do you see is the most challenging part? But after hearing one of your answer, like not being a complaint, like don't be a complainer, but become like problem solver, I'll pivot my question to what do you see is the new opportunities like during this new normal COVID life? And in terms, I guess this question has two parts, like one part is more in terms of career and networking, and the other part is more in terms about the market trend.
Okay, so you're asking about new opportunities from COVID or from post-COVID on networking, and then on
the new normal,
right, and then on just general market trend. Well, I think people talk about revenge spending. I think that will apply on revenge human interaction, right? Once it's safe to go out again, and I hope, you know, that you know, a lot of the organization will start tipping their toe to, you know, come back with smaller scale event and then bigger scale events, right? Because we all miss those, you know, we all having Zoom fatigue. It's never the same, even though technology do these breakout room fun things. But I miss hanging out with people and the full experience, having great food and a glass of wine. So I would say prepare yourself, and especially I ask myself as well, because as an introvert, I got pretty comfortable for the last years to stay at home and doing this virtual event. I'm actually very comfortable. So mentally, I have to prepare and start visualizing, and maybe start going to smaller scale of gathering once it's safe to do that, and then just be prepared when it's safe to come out again. Who are the people I want to call and get a casual lunch, right? And prioritize my time. So that's number one. And then in terms of market trend, yeah, I think that also play into once you can have lunch with people, what are the interesting topic you want to bring about, right? We can all talk about what we do as a hobby and self-isolation, but I think we all want to hear some new ideas from each other that's going to make you memorable. As soon, you know, we're not talking about lunch with friends, but lunch with your, you know, network contacts, right? So new market trend, I think a couple of things. First of all, this is a pandemic as well as recession, right? Every time after recession, for example, the dot-com bust and you know, the Amazon and Google grew rapidly after the 2000 internet crash, right? And after the 2008 great financial crisis, a lot of fintech come out successfully because of the lack of trust in the traditional banking industry in some of the countries like US and UK, right? So this time, for sure, we'll have a lot of new business model coming out, right? A couple of things what I can see as obvious as everyone can see is the more readiness of consumer using e-commerce on not just clothing or both, but also, you know, let's say buying auto parts, right? Like bumper, you know, on Amazon, right? That's going to open up a lot of new opportunities and reward company that can pivot rapidly, right? Related to that, right, the customer loyalty, how do you manage it? It's gonna be quite different from the past, especially I think this pandemic and recession would have weed out some of the weaker player, right? So for those that survive, how do you continue to build a customer loyalty, right? So that's number two. And number three, I think in the retail space, we talk a lot about the O2O, right? The omni-channel experience. I think right now is real, right? And how do you drag people back to the shopping mall? The shopping mall need to be a complete different reimagined, right? I know Catalyst Farewell have been doing a lot of work on that to making sure the shopping mall is really a pleasant, entertaining gathering space that is exciting to go. It's not just for shopping, but it is like a hangout that we meet up with our friends there, right? And fourth, in terms of restaurant scene, right? You probably have seen article talk about the ghost kitchen. I think that's a real trend, right? Ghost kitchen basically is you can have a warehouse or industrial kitchen. You don't need the retail footprint, but that that wholesale kitchen can have many signs. It could be a Rebecca Pang Chinese or a How Thai food, whatever, right? One space and based on the order from Uber, you just put it into different box, different dish, right? So that will be a trend. And then in terms of supply chain, I think it really trigger a lot of companies to think about how they should diversify their supply chain, and same for countries thinking about how they can bring the supply chain onshore again, especially for critical industry like PPE or your medical supplies. Like here in Canada, we totally see how disadvantaged it is when you don't have your own supply of vaccine, right? It takes a long time to wait for that. So all those, and I know long-term care or retirement facility will have some new model, a new way of operating to maintain those hygiene protocols, given what we've seen in the last year. Commercial real estate space, which I'm more familiar, lots of new trend, right? Industrial warehouse space is hot because of the e-commerce trend, right? The office space need a lot of reimagining, right? What is office? What does office play in a role for our life in the future? Are we all working a pod that you can reconfigure easily, right? Given that we may only spend 3 days a week in the office, that we may not need that permanent seat, right? And retail, as I talk about, need to be reimagined. Even like multi-residential apartment, condo building, how do you ensure people's work from home life is more pleasant? So all these trends, and to be honest, I look at other countries, right? Because China definitely recovers faster than us. So I look at what's going on there, and could be indicative to what will be seen in North America.
Awesome, that's fascinating. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca, so far. We have 3 more questions. Priyanka,
Okay.
can you go? I see your hand is raised.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for answering the last question so well. Like, you really explained what's really going on in every industry, whether it's supply chain, restaurants, or corporate. My question is related to more of Asian markets, because that's where your expertise is and you deal with. How is the capital market is impacted during COVID for Asian markets? Because I come also from Asian market and my industry is badly impacted with COVID, and I'm seeing like so many businesses are going out of market. So how's the future looking for businesses as we are moving forward in new norms in the Asian market space?
Your question is about the market outlook for the
Asian market.
For the Asian market.
Yeah.
It's a very broad question. So you're thinking about going back to Asian market, or anything to do with Asian business here?
No, I'm not, but I'm considering of all the factors that are impacting the North American markets or American market. Right now, I'm working with the American financial institution, and I'm seeing so many people who are applying for loans, the businesses who are being impacted, because there are resources in in these markets in North America and America, but in other countries like Asian markets, the countries are not very well developed, so there are less resources, less infrastructure. So how those markets are being impacted, and what are the challenges you think we are going to face in coming year or by end of this year?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a broad question, right? Because every country, it's also a wide range, right? Like China, what China is facing could be very different from India. And you rightfully point out, generally, North America, the government do spend a lot more in supporting the businesses, right? So then there's pros and cons for it. It's not free money, right? Someone's going to pay for it, right? And people will argue that we are paying to delaying the impact, right? So that could be also one factor. Right now, we may not see the full extent of it because with the wage subsidies and the rent subsidies and all of those, we haven't seen a lot of bankruptcy for Canadian companies yet, and we don't know whether we will ever see it or we may see it in Q3 or Q4, right? But it's also interject with how fast we open up and encourage a lot of the cash sitting in people's pocket to put it back into the economy, right? And also like big organizations, they are holding cash as well as the individual as well. So I think there are a number of factors in play on how it will play out in North America, and also talking about huge difference between Canada and US, right? For Asia, I really don't know. I mean, part of it is I can also only speak about China, right? Because that's I'm a little bit more familiar, right? Put aside on other non-economical factors that I'm not going to touch on, but economically, I think there's enough of consumption, internal consumption to drive the engine back up, and we have seen it, right? Because China has really recovered and bounced back pretty nicely from a GDP growth perspective. And I think the big question is really the geopolitical, which I won't touch on too much, but how the trade relationship gonna affect China. And in a way, I read a chart that in reality, the COVID, despite the supply chain disruption in the early stage of COVID, but later on, China's market share of the whole world supply chain actually gone up, because when the rest of the world is suffering, China already recovering, right? So that has been a trend and still going up, right? So it's really hard to see how the rest of the world will completely, delineate that supply chain reliance. So I think, from a manufacturing base perspective, China will continue to play an important role, and internal consumptions will continue to be strong. So I don't know whether you're asking a question to decide where you want to be. If it is, I would just say, I remind myself, right, when I first came here, it's pretty hard to compare 9%, 8% GDP growth in China at that time versus 2% in Canada. At the end of the day, like, I think about what trickled down to me, and think about my family, where I want to raise my family. That's really what it comes down when I choose where I want to stay, because the faster GDP growth definitely means more opportunity. But it's too macro for me to make my decision where I want to stay, and there are many other non-economical factors that come into play.
Absolutely. Thank you. You almost covered like all the aspects, what's really going on in North America and what's going on in China, especially. And I totally agree. Like, where whole world was scrambling, China was the only country who was really active in trade, and the supply chain had a very strong point where the people really grew during pandemic and took advantage of the pandemic situation. So thank you for answering all my questions.
Awesome. I have a question here. This person says, I am a business analyst in tech. In tech. I would like to break into capital markets. I have been working as a senior BA at Scotiabank, supporting compliance for 3 years. I was wondering how to make a switch. I primarily have a master's in accounting and management. So this person has a master's in accounting and management, currently works for Scotiabank as a senior BA and wants to move into capital markets.
Yeah. I think there are some general advice will still apply no matter whether you want to move from A to B or B to C, right? And then I can comment a little bit on specific getting into capital market. As I mentioned, networking is very important, and really think about who do you compete with, right? What can you bring in terms of additional value, right? And is it enough to bridge your potential disadvantage, right? And then the first thing still apply that how do you tell your story to the HR recruiting person that tie back to how you position your resume, your prior experience or current experience to be something that they want, right? And that you can really spend a lot of time in looking at the job description or looking at other websites, because capital market is just a lot of information out there on what type of people, what type of skills they're looking for, and try to pivot and position yourself, your skills to fit those categories, right? So those will be important no matter where you want to pivot from one field to another field or from one industry to another industry. Specifically on capital market, obviously it's a competitive field, right? Everyone, I can say everyone, many people want to get in. So you have to know your competition, right? Who are the people, these will be the people who currently working in the Big Four corporate finance field. You look up their LinkedIn, see what kind of experience they bring, and see how you can bridge the gap. And again, what value add you can bring above and beyond. These could be the people, your competitors could come from one bank already in the capital market and want to join another bank, maybe a promotion, or they're in the capital market middle office or back office, want to move to front office, right? Again, I don't know what role in capital market you want to get into, or it could be from a smaller bank, capital market want to get into a bigger bank, right? So you have to know yourself and know your competition, and you need to spend a lot of time on crafting, a convincing case, right? And in terms of bridging the gap, as I mentioned, right, if you don't have the directly relevant experience yet, you can bridge the gap by getting certain designation, right? CFA. Not everyone in capital market have a CFA, but having a CFA just means you are dedicated in finance sector, and you have gone through a very rigorous program, right? People spend 2.5 years, 3 years or more to get a CFA designation. So it's a very well-known designation that have the credibility. People know you have done pretty difficult material.
Awesome. I hope that answers your question, the person who asked it. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Do you have any final words? It could even be like lessons learned along your career journey for the team before we wrap up this evening.
Yeah, I always say at the end of the day, you only need, you may face many no's, no, but you only need one yes, right? And sometimes the most important yes come from yourself, right? It's very easy to lose hope, and I totally get that, immigrant or whatnot, like every time you receive a rejection, it's very disheartening, but you just have to keep going and pat yourself on the shoulder. And another thing I thought about as springtime is coming is, Yeah, every time when you move a plant from one area to another area, you have to take out the whole root. And when you replant it in a new location, it takes a while for that plant to thrive again, right? Let alone for a person when you move from one country, home country to here, it's basically uprooting yourself and replant yourself in a complete new environment. So it may take a few years, a few trial and error to figure out what works, but be patient. Just like gardening and planting, moving a plant take a lot of patience and nurturing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time again, Rebecca. I guess we're all clapping, even if we're on mute, because I see House clap. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everyone for attending, spending your Tuesday evening with us, letting the sun go down on our conversation. Once again, do not forget to check us out at www.thefreshstarthub.com. Listen to David's voice on every podcast platform you listen to. Is also the Fresh Start Hub. There's also a podcast session with Rebecca, part 1 and part 2, very interesting. So if you have any additional questions or inquiries about Rebecca's story, please feel free to listen to our podcast on that. Follow her on LinkedIn. Her name is Rebecca Pang on LinkedIn, right, Rebecca?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. And also follow the Fresh Start Hub on LinkedIn. And that's it for me. Have a lovely evening, everyone, and welcome to spring.
Thank you once again.
Thank you so much.